Welcome back, everyone. This is Austin Revel here at 2F by C Tactical to bring you some actual good news in the gun world. Not something I get to do when we do our news updates all that often. It's usually about what anti-gun states are trying to cram down our throats. But today we actually have a very positive and kind of a contrast between two systems of thinking. South Dakota passing pro-gun laws, removing suppressors from NFA restrictions in the state, and we'll get into what that means and what that looks like here in a minute, versus, say, Virginia that tried to cram a $500 tax down our throats. I say our throats, the citizens of Virginia throats, that has died in committee. So that is good, but that also showing the tax the two sides are taking. But before we get into that, please like, comment, subscribe, help the channel grow. We'd like to hit 25,000 followers by June, so please help us reach that. And if this is a channel you really enjoy, again, hop down in those comments, tell us something that you want to hear about, or a firearm you'd like us to feature, or a review you want, any of those things. We try to get back to everybody. I love the comments that, I don't know, that's personally the interactions, love it. Shoot us an email. And if it's a From the Vault video that you'd like us to do on a rare piece, maybe it's a rare piece you have, we'll work out a way to get it so we can do a video on that. But let's dive into today's video about South Dakota. So South Dakota is a very pro-gun state. I would make the argument Wyoming actually might be the most pro-gun state in the nation. But with that being said, South Dakota is not far behind. They did something that got signed into law, which I think is excellent, and something pushed by the ASA and Silencer Central. Excuse me, my brain farted there. Silencer Central over there, based in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which was to remove suppressors from their restricted arms list. Now, what does that do practically? That doesn't mean the suppressors are off the National Firearms Act as it pertains to South Dakota. So principally, there's no change right now for you to purchase a suppressor in South Dakota. But that sets it up for the future when, I say when because I'm pretty hopeful that the suppressors come off the National Firearms Act. Whether that's through a lawsuit, which again, little shout out for those guys. Support those who support you. Gun Owners of America. Yes, NRA, ILA, they are doing some good work. Second Amendment Foundation, FPC, Firearm Policy Coalition, National Association of Gun Rights here in Minnesota, Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. These guys fight for our rights. You should absolutely support them. And there is a lot of lawsuits to try to get these NFA items that the tax is reduced to zero on off the National Firearms Act, to make them either regular items or unregulated items completely. That is the idea. So that's what South Dakota is kind of setting up for ahead of time. They're saying that suppressors aren't anything. So if they ever come off the National Firearms Act, you don't need a background check or anything. You can just buy them, just like you would any accessory, like a magazine or anything like that. It makes some sense because silencers or suppressors have no mechanical function in and of themselves. I could take one, set it on this table. There's no moving parts to it. It can't do anything by itself. There's almost nothing in America that we regulate that has no mechanical function to itself. It actually is really, really interesting. I have a little acrylic piece right here that helps prop this gun up. It does as much as a suppressor by itself. It doesn't do anything. But for some reason, we treat these things as if they're weapons of mass destruction. I do find it quite interesting. So this is kind of South Dakota getting ahead of the game. And I do think we're going to start seeing some of these type of legislations pass through those really pro-gun states, deregulating suppressors and short barrel rifles and stuff like that, at least taking them off their restricted status within the state. Because it should be brought up that there are going to be some states where this is a problem. Hey everyone, quick pause in the video to give a shout out to our channel sponsor, Patriot Mobile. Now, I have been with Patriot Mobile for 2 years personally, and I cannot be happier with my service. I have the unplugged phone that I got because of Sean Ryan's podcast, but they have every phone you could want. And as the only Christian conservative wireless provider on the market, they put their money where the mouth is, which is supporting the rights that you and I enjoy, including the Second Amendment, which is what we're all about here at 2F by C Tactical. So please give them a consideration for switching. We are all using phones and mobile wireless all the time. So why not support a company that supports you? Using the code shall not infringe. you can save over at Patriot Mobile, and there will be a unique link code down below, so please go check it out. Now back to the video. So let's take Hawaii, for instance, or actually, no, let's take Illinois. So Illinois has a blanketed prohibition on all things NFA, all of them, saying that they're illegal in this and the state. Now there's lawsuits about that with like suppressors and stuff right now that could change at least some of the items, but as of right now, there's a blanket NFA ban in Illinois. Let's just say that suppressors come off the National Firearms Act. Does that make them legal in Illinois? That is up for a little bit of debate. And my answer should that happen constitutionally? Yes. Constitutionally, yes, because they're constitutionally protected. They're not a dangerous and unusual, quote unquote, item. They're no longer heavily regulated. Therefore, they're like anything else. You get to have them. I'm just going to tell you that right now. That's not how Illinois is going to treat that. That's not how they're going to treat that at all. So there might have to be some bills like this. And of course, in places like that, you're not going to get bills. You're going to end up getting lawsuits if we're realistic. But that is what South Dakota is trying to set the precedent for. Let's get ahead of this thing. Let's get it ready for when that happens. I think I commend them. This is a very good pro-gun direction that they took. And again, we should give shout outs and kudos to those who do that. Now in Virginia, it's kind of the contrast. They didn't try to deregulate suppressors. They tried to overtax them and cram down a $500 tax to Virginians. It's the first time, I mentioned in the video before, that you've seen a state try to collect NFA tax locally. I'm not saying that it's an NFA tax. It is a state tax. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying that they're trying to copy that on the state level. We've never seen anything quite like that before. I think that would violate the United States versus Star Tribune case from 1986, I believe, which was an extra tax on pen and paper and ink that was ruled unconstitutional because you can't do that for the First Amendment. I would assume that would apply here. We all know that sometimes courts don't always agree with us and uphold the Constitution, but that is what they tried to do. Now, that is effectively dead in committee. So again, all you Virginians that reached out, good on you. You put pressure on. It does matter. I'm not saying we're winning every battle. That's not what I'm saying. I get a lot of comments when you say, call your local representatives. My local representatives can't stand me. I agree. I'm here in Minnesota. Trust me. They don't like us either. That doesn't mean that we don't have a job to do and we should do it. We should let them know that we're watching always and then show up peacefully, march in numbers. It worked during the Civil Rights Movement. If you put pressure on people, whether phone calls, marching, and showing your numbers peacefully, politicians don't like that. The South was predominantly Democrat and very pro segregation, not pro civil rights movement at all. And there was a lot of those states that were pushing very hard, including Lyndon Baines Johnson, by the way, who was a Texas Democrat, did not like that. But all the pressure and momentum that was built up through the civil rights movement made it so even him, who said awful racist things, could not stand up and squash the civil rights movement. He was forced to sign it, actually. So we can make that kind of change, guys. It does take some belief, a leap of faith, and it does take a little bit of work on our part. And fighting for our constitutional rights, we can never let our foot off the gas. We can never do that. And it is going to take some work, and it's going to take some hard work. We're going to have to roll up our sleeves a little bit and get dirty on this kind of stuff. And we're going to have to do the dirty work, making the calls, writing the letters and the emails, and showing up. And of course, voting, always voting. A lot of gun owners don't vote. It's like voting against your own interest. I personally don't get it. Here in the state of Minnesota, some of the recent studies say that less than 10% of hunters in the state of Minnesota vote. Could you imagine if you could get all those people to show up? Like what we could do. And that's the reality. So we can't be laissez-faire about our constitutional rights. We have been that in the past, and we've seen them eroding. And now to rebuild them, it's going to take some work. It's going to be hard. And again, like I said before, support those who support you. All that matters. But this does show us a path that the two sides, pro-gun, anti-gun, are taking. The pro-gun side is starting on the deregulation. And we see Missouri pass a Second Amendment Protection Act. Wyoming is doing that as well and updating that. There's a whole bunch of things. And yes, I know that the Bondi and the others are fighting that. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm going to call out the Trump administration on that. They aren't supporting the Second Amendment nearly enough. Yes, they are technically right that they're the most pro-gun DOJ that we've ever had, but that bar is so low, almost anyone could be. You could, so let's be real. That's not because they're doing an amazing job at this. They need to start pushing for our rights. The time is now. And when it comes to the anti-gun states, they are just trying to regulate and tax the crap out of these things. They're trying to do what the National Firearms Act purported to do in 1934, which is tax the general public out of it, saying that, while we can't technically ban it, we're just going to tax it so you can't afford it. And by the way, when you do that, that's also banning and also a violation of the Second Amendment. And I do hope that the Supreme Court has some things to say about this. They need to get the backbone and start taking 2A cases. They have to. And throwing us the Wolford v. Lopez case isn't one of them. That is an important one to take up, but that's an easy decision. The whole point of having lifetime appointments is so that you take the hard decisions and you do the right thing. That's why you have a lifetime appointment. If you're going to start being so nervous about doing the hard rulings, which John Roberts, as Chief Justice, has clearly shown that he's not really willing to go into those hard rulings, then I say get rid of the lifetime appointments then. Then we're going to make you elected, because there's no point in having a lifetime appointment if you're just going to not do the bold, the right thing and uphold the Constitution, even when sometimes it's unpopular. Like, the Constitution exists for a reason, and there are things in there that are unpopular at times. Equality for all men was unpopular one times. It's still worth upholding. It doesn't matter if it's popular or not. The answer is legal and right. Sometimes we don't even know what we're asking. If we don't like someone saying something, we shouldn't go out there and say restrict it. We are hearing that, and we're seeing parts of the world like Canada and the UK where they do that. The First Amendment exists. It doesn't matter if it's something I like or I don't like. I have my own opinions on different religions. In America, you get to practice them because we have the protections of the First Amendment. Just because I don't like a particular religion doesn't mean you don't get to practice it here. You do. That's part of freedom. It means that people sometimes get to do things I don't like, and vice versa. That's how this works. It's a double-edged sword. That does mean when people violate those things, that we should be bringing the hammer down, because the Bill of Rights is sacred. Anytime you violate the Bill of Rights and take away rights from another person, the consequences should be beyond severe, because that is the ultimate quote-unquote sin. The ultimate violation is when you deny a right to another person. I also think this should apply to politicians. I've heard, people like Jared on Guns and Gadgets, we should bring back tar and feathering. I don't disagree, because you get elected, you place your hand on the Bible or whatever else, hold up your right hand and say, I swear to uphold the Constitution and protect from enemies both foreign and domestic. That's what you say. And then you turn around like Virginia, New Mexico, and just dump all over the Constitution. I'm sorry. No, that's called treason. That is, someone said we should make that a felony when you willingly violate the Constitution. It technically already is. It's called treason. And we should bring back severe consequences when people restrict the rights of others. We used to have that in this country, and we've gotten soft. We've gotten soft on punishing crime. We've gotten soft on protecting people's rights. And the U.S. government has become about taking people's rights, not forcefully enforcing them. John F. Kennedy was a Democrat. I don't know if people realize that, but he was a Democrat. That was being facetious, obviously. And you know what? He went in and used the National Guard to ensure that the civil rights weren't violated on African American students at the University of Alabama in 1963. And he was absolutely 100% correct to do so. Their rights were being violated by the state, and George Wallace, who was a Democrat, by the way, I might throw that in as well, and he sent the troops in. He was correct to do so. And we should get back to the government doing its very job. It's so worried about taxing us, which is already taxing us to death, so worried about putting restrictions in on us on every walk of life and make it so we have to ask permission to do everything. That is not the bargain that we have with the federal government. The federal government is supposed to be small and out of the way mostly, and to ensure that the civil rights of you and I aren't violated. That is its job. It needs to get back enforcing it. We have too many states pushing forward all these restrictions on both First Amendment and Second Amendment protected rights, not to mention Fourth Amendment rights, saying search and seizures, because they are restricting, say, magazines and forcing us to give them up. These are the things the federal government needs to start stepping up. And that includes you, Supreme Court. Yes, because guess what? You're a part of the three branches of government. You need to stand up. We need to have Congress and congressional people have a backbone. And I'm so tired of these paid individuals. They go in there and get them to vote every which way, and it's you and me that gets left out in the dust. We need to be absolutists. The Second Amendment says shall not be infringed. Yes, for all of you out there, I hear you in the comments, but it says a well-regulated militia. Well, you know what it didn't say in that sentence, if we want to play your semantics, is a well-regulated arms instead of well-regulated militia. So that means the arms were exempt because there's a little comma there, and that the militia itself needs to be regulated. But that's actually not what it means. What it actually means when they say regulated back then was a well-trained militia, which is made up of you and I. And how do I know that that's what they meant? Well, they said in the Federalist Papers. Let's start there. Also, there was this thing called Lexington and Concord, the shot heard around the world, where a bunch of farmers, some of them as young as like 10 years old, stood on a field across from the biggest, baddest army ever trained, the Redcoats of Great Britain, of the British Empire, of which they were technically subjects of at the time, and said, you came here to seize arms, we say no more. You came here to enforce the 1.5% sales tax as only tea, we say no more. That is what they did. They took on a daunting task, and they ended up winning against all odds. I would say because God was on their side. I also would say because their righteousness caught, or their cause is righteous, excuse me. That has a lot to do with it. Now, that's not saying that in warfare, every time righteous causes win. That is not true. We know that that's not true. I'm saying in this instance it did. And we need to get back to that kind of mentality of no, our birthright as Americans is to have the Bill of Rights. And those Bill of Rights ensure that me and you have the liberty and life in which we can make what we make of it. It isn't a guarantee of outcome. It never is. No one can guarantee an outcome. Only God can guarantee an outcome. Man and government cannot. The government's job is to stay out of the way so you and I can pick ourselves up and make something of ourselves in this land of opportunity, which is why everybody wants to come here. Because despite the fact of all of our issues, and we have a ton of them, we're still perceived as the land of opportunity. How about we live up to that building and become that again? That is what I'm saying. Now, please, guys, check out our news section as we continue to bring you updates on cases and things like this particular one where you see South Dakota doing one thing and Virginia doing another. I try to give you a decent breakdown on those kind of things. So always check out our news section. Again, thanks for tuning in. Please hit that subscribe button. It's free. It helps the channel grow and tells YouTube you like this kind of Pro 2A content. And if you would like to actually support us, and I say actually, I shouldn't say it that way. If you would like to financially support us at all, it's certainly not required. We can make our content free for a reason. Go over to our Patreon, subscribe over there. We really appreciate everyone that has. It helps us bring to you better, higher quality content. And again, it will help keep the channel growing, and we're going to do that. We'll see you on the next video.